Now we've recently had some guy by the name of Charles, quote, Chase, unquote, Brandon, saying that he was absolutely sure, based on what he had read, that there was a crash at Roswell, and the government has a lot more information than they're letting on. This guy, Harry Rositsky, was claimed to be Falcon himself. Now, Rositsky did not say this. This is information that has come about because apparently Rositsky died. I can't verify anything other than we know that Rositsky had a track record for the CIA because he published some stuff having to do with intelligence, and he was apparently in counterintelligence and disinformation. So that raises a question of was Bill Moore the recipient of intentional disinformation? Rositsky was apparently a big player in counterintelligence against the Soviet Union, and that would include partially trying to disinform the Soviets. So one has to immediately raise the question, was that information that Bill Moore was given by Rositsky, was that sort of like the truth, or was that disinformation? And this is all tied up with things like the MJ12 documents, the so-called Eisenhower briefing document, which was ostensibly a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower on November 18th, 1952. These documents have been around since 1987. They were released first. The Eisenhower briefing document was released by Timothy Good in England, and then Bill Moore here in the United States in the spring of 1987. And of course immediately caused a big stir because the Eisenhower briefing document, if it's true, is really the whole ball of wax right there. Things are real. There are bodies. We've been studying back engineering and trying to learn the biology of creatures and so on ever since 1947, according to the Eisenhower briefing document. Well, this has been around for a long time. As I said, the Eisenhower briefing document has been argued up and down every which way. Skeptics say there's no backup evidence for it. They also claim, that Bill Moore had made up Falcon and Condor, or Falcon and Condor, or Richard Doty and Bob, what's his name in the Air Force. I can remember Bill telling me about this guy Falcon, who had all sorts of connections, and was telling Bill, giving him hints as to where to look, what documents to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to, and what was real and what wasn't, and so on. Now we supposedly know who Falcon really was, and that he did have the connections. And my first question is, did he have any reason for knowing? Was there any reason for him to know anything about Roswell at all? If Roswell had been true, a crash of an alien craft. Rositsky was into counterintelligence with the Soviets. He wasn't into scientific intelligence. So I have to raise the question, as I said, as to whether or not Rositsky was feeding Bill a disinformation line. I don't know if this helps us at all in terms of the so-called MJ12 documents, which began with the Eisenhower briefing document that was first made available to Bill in December of 1986, I believe it was. Or no, 1985, I think. It's been a long time since I got out about the dates. But anyway, and then there were more documents that came out after that, from several sources, which any one of which would amount to blowing the lid off the cover-up if they could be proven real. And so now I'm sort of torn between wondering whether or not, as I said, a lot of the stuff that Bill got was disinformation. This is quite independent of the Roswell investigation itself, which largely depends upon the testimony of witnesses. and said witnesses are not part of the Russian disinformation team. You could well imagine they were Air Force, Army Air Force people primarily, who were witnesses, and so I think Roswell stands on its own as an investigation, which indicates that really something happened at Roswell. The questions still are surrounding the documents that I'm talking about. Now, the Eisenhower briefing document talks about, as I said, it was supposedly an initial briefing for President Eisenhower. The date was November 18th, 1952. Whoever wrote the Eisenhower briefing document knew what that date was, and if it were a fake, somebody had to do a lot of research to find out exactly what day that briefing took place. We know that Eisenhower was invited into the Pentagon on the 18th of November, and when he came out, he was looking very grim. The crash at Roswell, not using the exact terminology that we use, and talks about another crash on the 6th of December of 1950. In the El Indio Guerrero area around the border of Texas with Mexico. Now that crash has yet to be proven one way or another. The one witness that claimed to have information about that crash, Willingham, Colonel Willingham, turns out to be probably an exaggeration, if not a complete fake. We don't know when he supposedly saw this crash, but it just so happens that on the 6th of December of 1950, there was in fact an immediate there was an alert in the morning. The United States went on high alert for a short period of time as a result of some things being detected by radar coming from the northeast over the Greenland, following a track that might be the track of Soviet bombers if they had decided to start the Third World War just by flying bombers over the United States and dropping them on Washington, D.C. In other words, whatever was picked up by radar on December 6, 1950, caused enough concern for the military in the United States to go on a high alert until they found out what it was. And they never did find out what it was. On the 8th of December of 1950, the FBI was informed that the Counterintelligence Corps of the United States had been put on immediate high alert for any information related to flying saucers. This sounds kind of strange, to be put on immediate high alert for any information related to flying saucers, since the government continually told the people that there was nothing to flying saucers, nothing to worry about. There's no evidence of a threat to the United States from flying saucers. So why are they on immediate high alert for information on flying saucers? The FBI never found out why that alert was, and when I found out the document in the FBI files that talked about that, I made my own check with the Counterintelligence Corps, and they said they had no record of it. If Rositsky was feeding Bill disinformation, there's a possibility that this was disinformation fed to Bill with the intent of convincing the Russians that we had a flying saucer. But why do that? I mean, if they knew that we had one, which we presumably would be top secret knowledge, if they knew that we had one, they might try to get their own, or at least feel it would be possible for them to get one. So why let them know anything? It's really a house of mirrors here, where no matter which way you look, you sort of see yourself trying to figure out what's going on. Well, I bring this up because the identity of the Falcon has been, as I said, claimed to be various people over the years, and now supposedly we finally know who it really was. He's no longer available to interview, so we don't know what he would say. If someone were to ask him if he ever heard of MJ12 or Roswell or any of that stuff. It should be understood that Stalin had spies trying to find out if there really was something picked up at Roswell. And after the perestroika and glasnost, the opening of the Soviet society in the 80s, there were some people, as I recall, who had worked for, who were second generation technical spies, you might say, for the Soviet Union, who knew that Stalin had started two independent investigations of flying saucer stuff. He obviously heard of what was being reported in the United States because it was reported throughout the whole world. It probably with the beginning of the phenomenon with Kenneth Arnold on June 24th, 1947. Kenneth Arnold's story went around the world in June 25th, 1947, and then there were sightings coming right up through the 4th of July and so on in the United States and in other countries as well. These things are being seen. And Stalin apparently paid some attention to it, and my guess is that when they tried to stomp on a Roswell case by claiming it was a weather balloon, any intelligent person who knew anything about the capabilities of people who were stationed at the Roswell Army Air Base would have known that those people could tell a weather balloon from some outer space craft. So immediately there would be the suspicion that there's something's being covered up. And Stalin might well worry that what was being covered up was a crash of a new type of American aircraft that would fly circles around anything he had. So the point is he put his spies, and there were plenty of them in the Southwest because they were after atomic secrets, and yet most of the atomic secrets were in the Southwest. He put his spies on to finding out what they could about flying saucers. And he apparently had two high-level Soviet people independently carrying out investigations of this flying saucer stuff. Both groups concluded that there was something going on. They didn't know exactly what, but there was no threat to the Soviet Union. Well, I've long thought that the government's not going to admit to anything until the weight of public opinion is so great that it could almost topple the government. When much more than 50% of the people say it's real, then the government might be willing to admit something. But you know, it depends on what that information is. If the information is that these guys from the outer space are coming, or wherever, are coming to help us, or they're just watching us, and they're not going to do anything, that would produce one sort of response from the people if the government were to admit it. If the government knew that they were coming to eat us or something like that, which is detriment to our society, the government would be very reluctant to say anything unless they could see some way that we could protect ourselves. So if the government were to see that release of the information would result in us developing self-protection, then they'd probably be more likely to release something. What I'm talking about is some videos from Chile. We were told that there were 7 independent videos showing aerial phenomena around that occurred during an air show in November 2010. A number of people were taking videos of airplanes of various types flying over the air base south of San Diego in Chile. And apparently one guy looking through his video on a frame-by-frame basis to look for good in-still pictures for whatever use he was going to make of them, publication or something. He started to find that there were dark spots that seemed to be from frame to frame following trajectories or path. Like, for example, you're recording at, let's say, 10 frames per second, and you're seeing the sky with white clouds and blue sky areas, and you're seeing these airplanes flying along, and suddenly over a period of 4 or 5 frames you see a dark spot that appears